guys, welcome back to my channel. So I have finally put together a list of my ultimate tips to try and get into the Big Four, the almighty. I currently work as an audit junior at one of the Big Four, and I got the job while applying in my final year of university, or I think what would be college in America. It was really hard, and it was really stressful because I was trying to do all these applications at the same time as my actual exams and coursework and stuff for final year. I really put a lot of effort into my applications and used a couple of tips that I haven't seen available as information for budding graduates, so I thought I would share some of them. These are tips that are kind of tailored towards Big Four applications, probably Big Six, Big 10, and also I think they can be utilized with like most grad schemes at larger kind of like multinational firms. Let's just hop right into it. So the first tip, which is actually probably my most helpful and the most unique thing out there that I think I did that really did give me not only an edge in my interviews but also some confidence during the interviews, and that is to just hop onto LinkedIn, search for people that work at the firm you're applying to, in the city that you're applying to, so basically potentially your colleagues, connecting with them. You can add in like a little message to your invitation to connect, and you can send them a little message. And what I used to do is just type up, hey, so-and-so, I'm in 4th year at the university of whatever, and I'm looking for some advice for my upcoming interview with whoever. If they've given you the details of the partner or the director that's going to be interviewing you, then pop their name in. You might be able to get some tips on what their personality is like, what kind of person they are, and the things that I used to focus on were their actual experience of the firm so far, so that I could utilize that in my interview answers by showing whoever was interviewing me that I am familiar with maybe like progression once you're a grad, or day-to-day activities that you would do, anything that they had found useful, that they had wished they had known. I'm basically just trying to get as much information as I could out of someone who's potentially going to ignore your message. So don't send them a huge long message, and also don't expect replies from absolutely everyone, so don't put all your eggs in this basket. I probably messaged I think about 30 to 40 people, and only about 5 or 6 people actually got back to me, but the people that did get back to me provided me with invaluable advice. A small little tip, if messaging people out of the blue is a bit intimidating for you, you don't want to do it, first of all, you've got literally nothing to lose by doing it, and second of all, try and find some contacts elsewhere so that maybe you can have that kind of like first point of contact that you can build upon when you then request for their connection on LinkedIn. So for example, getting names at careers fairs, attending loads of careers events that the firms will publish and send communications about, like going to those events and getting names. So it doesn't matter if you don't have a great conversation at the event or the careers fair, get their name so then they will know who you are when you then request to connect with them on LinkedIn and you send them this message, if it's more comfortable for you to do it that way. My second tip is actually in relation to all the numerical and logical tests that you have to do in the very early stages of all these application processes. Now, I hate these tests. So many of them I failed the first time around. When I was applying for internships in 3rd year, I didn't get any because of not being able to get past these numerical and logical steps. And to be honest, I did not put in the amount of effort that you need to get used to these tests at that stage. I put in this effort in final year, and what I'm saying to do is to go to all these websites. I'll link a couple down in the description box, but go to all these websites and basically buy the year-long subscription. This is another thing I didn't do because I didn't think it was worth the money, but it is. You'll get huge bank of practice tests that you can do, and I would say to do them literally every single day so that you are comfortable with the time limits in these tests, and also get more used to the style of questions. And it's really important because acing these tests will get your foot into the application process and you can start focusing on what actually matters. My third tip is to completely understand your previous experiences and try and get as many competency examples out of them as possible. And what I'd recommend to do for this is to make a big long list of competencies and write down absolutely every single experience that you have in the STAR format, so that situation, task, action, and the result. So write all your experiences down in that exact format, so then when you remember these experiences, you remember them in that format. So then when you relay them to whoever is interviewing you, you will actually be quite succinct and clear in the points that you get across, and you end up not really rambling. I'd also recommend to write down every single experience you can think of in a little Word document or Google Sheets, and I actually made one of these for all my interviews, and it's a 46-page long document with every single competency you can think of, every kind of angle that the interviewer could kind of pose a question, and I wrote down my answers for every single question so that I was completely aware of all of my experiences and I could pull from any kind of example that I'd written down before. Let me know if you guys are interested in this document. I can kind of format it to kind of remove all my experiences and stuff and share it with you guys. So yeah, let me know if that's something you want to see. The fourth tip I have is to start as early as you can, and this is a huge regret of mine. So when I say early, I mean literally first year. Some of these firms have week-long shadowing programs and 2 to 3 day long like insight days where you can get your foot through the door, get your name thrown around the firm, and also, hugely importantly, to get used to the application process. So I regret not starting early, because when I actually needed to get an internship in third year, I didn't get one because that was my first time doing all the application processes, the numerical test, the phone calls, the competency questions, the interviews, and that was obviously the first time I'd failed. So that was my learning curve, but unfortunately the side effect of my learning curve was that I didn't get a Big Four internship in third year. So what I would recommend is start as early as you can so that you can get that practice in. So then even if you're not successful, at least you know what to expect the next time you apply. It's probably worth noting as well that your chances of getting your foot through the door of all these huge firms is a bit more likely the earlier you apply, because the competition is a tiny little bit less fierce compared to when you're applying as a graduate. I don't think this matters as much, because I think getting familiar with the application process is a bit more important than that. And the fifth tip to follow along nicely from the fourth tip is that every rejection is a lesson to be grateful for. And this is so easy to say now from my position as a person who did actually end up finally getting the job, but I would not be in this job without the countless amount of rejections I got from my initial application for internships in third year. And this is purely because I sought out feedback ruthlessly. I called back firms, I demanded feedback from assessment center failures, from interview rejections. I asked for specific examples of where I'd gone wrong, and I made sure to never make those mistakes again. And I would never have had that feedback had I not failed or been rejected. And also keeping the mindset of, okay, this rejection is something that I'm going to learn from in the future and will eventually lead me to the role that I will be in or I will deserve, is that it will help your mindset as well, because I feel like getting a lot of rejections continuously and continuously not getting a job can push you into a really dark and crappy place. But if you try and keep your mindset open and receptive to learning and working on feedback and just improving yourself and pushing on through, you'll hopefully feel a little bit better from that. So my sixth tip is to do with the assessment centers, and I hate assessment centers with all of my heart, all of it. They're really harsh, they are really time pressured, you feel so self-conscious the entire day. I swear to God, I've ruined the shirts that I wore to the assessment centers that I've been to because I just sweated through them all. I'm going to share my feedback that I got for these ones because I still have the notes from them. And just to give you an overview of how the assessment centers are usually broken down, there will be a team working exercise, there will be a report writing exercise, and you'll have to do the numerical and logical tests again, which is why I emphasize getting really used to those and nailing them. The team working exercise is where I went wrong time and time again, but it was for different reasons. So some of the feedback I got was that I didn't take the initiative to speak up when an opportunity arose to speak up or contribute my thoughts. And this was literally as simple as what I did in the assessment center that I didn't fail, contributing literally an opinion of a business plan that you'll have in front of you, listening to your teammate, contribute their opinion, and then just saying, that's a really interesting perspective, let's talk about that a bit more. That's literally it. In my earlier assessment centres, I got feedback that I wasn't making enough eye contact, which I think is a little bit ridiculous because there's a line between too little and too much, and I would rather be on the too little side than the too much. But here we are. This I practiced by talking to myself in the mirror all the time in my final year during the application process. And this I did with my competency examples, as I mentioned earlier. So I would just read out my competencies to myself in front of the mirror and then make sure I was like looking at myself in the eye and smiling and making sure I was like nodding and not doing anything weird. You just kind of get used to what you look like when you're speaking, and then it feels less weird when you're actually speaking in front of all these people who are kind of watching and marking you. And then the written part of the assessment is timed. That's the part where you write a report. Main things they're just looking for here is just a well-formatted report. So it's got your titles, your executive summaries, and the difference between your introduction and your executive summary. Exec summary will summarize the decisions you've made as a result of the report, the evaluations you've made, basically just allowing whoever's reading the report to be able to skim the first two paragraphs, so the introduction and the exec summary, to understand what they're about to read for the rest of the report. And then obviously just putting your headings for all the other sections and include a conclusion where you're making a recommendation based on whatever case you've been given. Usually it was just double-sided. It doesn't even matter the content as long as that format is there. You're gonna nail this part. And my seventh tip is to do with CVs and what you do in your spare time. So basically try and utilize your spare time as much as possible. Try and do things that you can put on your CV. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be flashy, just to make your CV as interesting as possible as you can with the time that you have at uni. And obviously knowing that you want to do this should come as early as possible. Obviously if you go into uni with the intention of, you know, using your spare time wisely, making your CV as interesting as possible, doing loads of like interesting cool things in your spare time, the earlier you know this, the better. What you can also do is just have people at careers fairs look over your CV, tell you if there's anything that they think is particularly interesting that you should talk about more. Try and get as much feedback as you can on your CV. The eighth tip I have is to literally send out as many applications as possible everywhere, literally everywhere. Again, this will help in getting used to the application process, and also it will just increase your chances. There's no eggs, there's no baskets in this game. There's just literally as many baskets out there as possible. You're just putting loads of eggs in them. I don't think this analogy is making sense at all, but let's go with it. And also to not niche your applications down. If you're interested in working at a certain firm in a certain department, but they don't have any more applications left open in that department, apply for a different role. As long as it's not vastly different, like you're not applying for marketing when you actually really ideally see yourself in finance, for example. But just know that you can move around in the firm once your grad scheme is over. There are so many options after you get your foot in the door, but getting your foot in the door is literally the most important step and the hardest step. And tip number 9 is just for the final interview. So during your final interview, don't be afraid to embrace the awkward silences. When your mouth gets dry, my mouth gets dry when I'm speaking for these videos. When it gets dry, literally just pause, take a sip of your water, inhale, recollect your thoughts. It might, and it actually will seem like 5 minutes, like a really long time to sit in silence awkwardly, but it's really not. This is a tip that's also really useful for public speaking. Just embrace the pauses. Try and think of really unique and interesting questions to ask the interviewer. You definitely want to do this step. Do not leave an interview without asking some questions that aren't generic. I asked my interviewer what the most challenging part of his junior training years were, because I was applying for a chartered accountancy graduate scheme. So I asked him what the most challenging parts of his training were, and then I kind of relayed some stories to relate to that. And the final tip is, when you're in the interview, try and act like you already work there. And that sounds really stupid, but hopefully you're going into that interview having found out as much information as you can about the role you're potentially going to be doing, the role you'll be doing in a year's time, from speaking to the graduates that you messaged on LinkedIn, and from humongous amount of research you will have done on the firm beforehand. Will ease your nerves and just make you feel a little bit better. So those were my tips for getting a job at the Big Four, and those are all tips that I utilized, and they're based on feedback that I got from the million rejections that I got before I landed my final role. I hope they're useful, and I hope some of them were at least new for you. I wish you the best of luck on all of your applications. You'll get there eventually. It's a long and hard process, but it's really rewarding once you get to the end. So thank you for watching this video, and best of luck on your application process.